Hey guys, it's Ria from Owls Nest Sanctuary for Wildlife. I want to take a minute tonight to talk to you guys about rabies. If you are living here in Florida, and I've even heard nationwide that you may be seeing a lot of media attention given to rabies. Now, rabies is a zoonotic disease. Zoonotic diseases are any disease that is passed from an animal to a human. There are several of them out there. There's actually over 100 different zoonotic diseases. But rabies is one that is passed from mammals to mammals. So looking at reptiles, an example might be salmonella. So reptiles can pass salmonella to humans. Birds can pass chlamydiosis to humans. However, birds nor reptiles nor insects nor fish can pass rabies to humans because they can't actually carry rabies. It is a virus. It is passed through saliva and from nervous system tissues because it's a virus that affects your nervous system. So in the end, it's going to infect your brain, unfortunately. But what that means is you need to have saliva or nervous system tissue enter your body in order for you to contract it. This means that you cannot get it through bug bites. A mosquito is going to draw blood from its meal, from its victim, and then inject you and draw blood from you as well. However, unless a mosquito somehow landed in the animal's mouth, became coated in saliva, and very quickly jumped into your open wound, you don't have anything to worry about. Because as soon as that saliva dries, the rabies is no longer able to transmit. So with it only occurring in mammals and it affecting your central nervous system, if you were to get bit by a mammal, what symptoms are you looking for to believe that you may have contracted rabies? So the early on symptoms are going to be those very similar to flu-like symptoms. You might have fever, you might have a headache, you might be feeling weak or just drained and uncomfortable. However, the later symptoms are much more severe, and once those symptoms set in, unfortunately, rabies has a very high fatality rate, almost 100%, once you've hit those later symptoms. So those are going to be insomnia, anxiety, confusion, paralysis, hallucinations, agitations, hypersalivation, so just enormous amounts of spit production, difficulty swallowing. So while being bit is not necessarily an emergent problem, it is urgent. You don't want to waste time seeing your doctor, but it's also not a drop everything and go to the ER right this second kind of thing. So if you've been bit by an animal, the very first thing you need to do is treat it just like you would any wound. You want to make sure you wash it really well, irrigate the wound, make sure it's nice and clean, and then see your physician. If you are able to keep the animal that bit you or scratched you, they can test it for rabies. Unfortunately, unless it's a healthy domesticated animal, the only real way for them to test it for rabies is to euthanize it and take samples of its brain in 2 different places and analyze it to see if there is in fact rabies virus present. In Florida, last year between January and September, there were 60 cases of animals with rabies. Now, I want to go back and talk about some CDC data real quick. The CDC said that annually, about 120,000 animals are tested for rabies. Those are animals that have either shown symptoms of rabies or have bit or scratched someone and needed to be tested for that person's safety. Of those 120,000 animals, only 6% actually had rabies. And one of them was a deer. Very strange, very rare occurrence, and that happened in North Carolina. So the acute period is 2 to 10 days where you're going to see those minor symptoms before it becomes major. But the animals that were responsible for the rabies cases in Florida, or that showed up with rabies, they didn't necessarily bite anyone, but they tested positive for rabies, were bats. We had 16 bats. We had 26 raccoons, 6 foxes, 2 skunks, 1 dog, and 9 cats. The big thing with cats, with the feral cat populations, no one is keeping track and making sure their vaccines are up to date. So that is a huge problem. Also, as people, we look at cats and assume they're domesticated. So we see a feral cat, we want to love it and pet it and feed it. And unfortunately, if we get bit, that is a potential risk of having rabies. So we want to make sure that we're controlling our feral cat populations. We're not leaving out food or water for dogs or cats because that could attract the wildlife. And if you happen across wildlife, please do not try to pick it up. Do not try to relocate it. If it's sick or injured, call a rehabilitator in your state. Let them give you direction on the best way to handle that. And a lot of times it's going to be just wait. The animal's going to move on, or they're sending someone out to the site. Another option is trappers, making sure you're working with a trapper who knows what they're doing and has the proper permits or certifications for your state. They may be able to assist as well. Now, what happens if you are on like a school campus and you find a bat on the ground? Tonight we've got a freeze advisory. It's going to be very cold and bats become chilled, and they are one of the higher numbers that we see here in Florida with rabies. If a bat becomes chilled, it may find itself on the ground. Leave it alone. Call your rehabilitator. They will send someone out who's trained and experienced in how to handle that situation. If, heaven forbid, it is in the middle of a sidewalk and you are afraid students are going to mess with it or potentially get bit itself, you can move it. You can box it. Wear thick gloves that they cannot penetrate by biting, or you could use a broom and sweep it into a box very, very gently, close the box up, and wait for your rehabilitator. But you don't want to be using bare hands. You don't want to be using latex gloves or anything they could penetrate because they do carry rabies. That doesn't mean every bat has rabies, but it is something to be cautious of. So anyone in this cold weather, if you're seeing things down on the ground, potentially injured, give us a call. Please, I'm begging you. And if you do get bit, seek medical attention immediately. Thanks. We love you guys. Have a good night.